in the heart of an ancient Nigerian kingdom, where carved palaces rose from red earth and palm trees whispered to the wind, there lived a young prince named Adam. He was born into gold, raised among servants, and surrounded by the steady rhythm of drums that announced royalty wherever he walked. From his first steps, the world told him who he was meant to be, heir to a throne, future king, symbol of power.
Yet behind the embroidery of his igba
And the quiet shine of coral beads around his neck, his heart carried a question that no crown could answer. He stood often within the palace halls, sunlight pouring through tall windows, reflecting off polished floors and carved wooden pillars. To the kingdom, he was perfection, handsome, disciplined, noble. To himself, he was uncertain. Every bow he received, every praise spoken in his name, every smile directed toward him seemed not meant for the man he was, but for the title he carried. He wondered if anyone truly saw him, or if they only saw what he represented. At times he would drift to the palace window, resting his hands on the cool stone as he gazed beyond the high walls. He watched farmers return from the fields, dust on their clothes, sweat on their brows,
laughter in their voices.
He watched children chase one another through open courtyards, free of expectations, free of titles. He saw women bargaining in the markets, men sharing stories under shade trees, families gathering at sunset, not because duty demanded it, but because love did. And in his chest, a longing took root, not for escape, but for understanding, not for freedom from responsibility, but for a life that could be chosen rather than inherited. When he sat upon the throne during court gatherings, the kingdom saw a future king. He sat straight, his posture composed, his expression calm. Yet inside him was a storm of thought. Many women had been presented before him, daughters of noble houses, adorned in fine cloth, speaking softly of wealth, palaces, and power. They praised his destiny before they ever spoke of his character. None asked about the boy he had been, the man he was becoming, or the fears he carried quietly in his heart.
He began to wonder whether love could exist in a
world where status stood taller than truth. During festivals and ceremonies, he stood in full regalia,
staff in hand, robes flowing,
admired by all.
Drummers beat rhythms that echoed through the courtyards.
Dancers moved in patterns older than memory, and the people cheered their prince. Yet admiration was not what he sought. He wanted understanding. He wanted a heart that would choose him, even if the beads were gone, even if the palace walls were far away. Each celebration left him more certain that what he needed could not be found within the comfort of his inheritance.
In the quiet of his chambers one evening, Articuno stood before a polished mirror. Not as a prince, not as an heir,
but as a man. His eyes reflected both strength and loneliness, both responsibility and doubt. He studied his own face, the kingdom knew so well, and whispered words only the walls could hear. If I were nothing, who would still choose me? The question did not come from pride, but from a hunger for truth. He walked the long palace halls later that night, guards bowing as he passed, servants stepping aside with practiced reverence. None knew that the prince moving through the corridors was preparing to disappear from the world they recognized. He did not wish to abandon his duty, nor to reject his destiny. He wished to understand it. He wished to learn whether the love he longed for was possible in a world that bowed so easily to gold. Though born into power, Articuno had always carried kindness in his actions. He spoke to servants as equals, listened to the stories of guards, and believed leadership was not about being above others, but standing with them. Now, he was ready to live what he had always believed in words. At dawn, he stepped onto the palace balcony as the first light of morning painted the rooftops in gold. The kingdom stretched before him strong, proud, waiting. This was the world he would one day rule. But first, he needed to understand it without protection, without privilege, without a crown. Inside his chamber, he removed his beads, one by one, each soft sound echoing like a farewell. He slipped out of his royal robe and folded it carefully. Finally, he lifted the small crown from his head. For a long moment, he held it in his hands not as a symbol of power, but as a weight of expectation. He placed it gently into a wooden chest. In its place, he wore simple clothes, worn sandals, and slung a small bag across his shoulder.
A wooden staff rested in his hand.
At that moment, the prince became a traveler, not to lose himself, but to find who he truly was. He passed through the palace gates at sunrise, the world beyond vast and unknown. He left behind luxury. He left behind certainty. He left behind the only life he had ever known. But in his heart burned a single purpose: to discover love that did not bow to wealth. The road carried him to a quiet village where life moved with the rhythm of the land. Children played in dust that glowed under the sun. Women balanced baskets on their heads, their laughter rising above the market sounds. Men worked the soil, their hands strong, their faces lined with honest labor. No one bowed. No one recognized him. For the first time in his life,
Edakuna was invisible and, strangely, he felt seen.
He asked for work. Some villagers glanced at his worn clothes
And shook their heads.
Others turned away, too busy to notice a stranger with empty pockets. Hunger pressed into his stomach, and disappointment tugged at his pride.
He found himself beneath a wide mango tree at the edge of the village as the sun began to lower, its light turning the sky into warm shades of orange and gold.
He sat on the ground, staff resting across his knees, wondering if his search for truth had been foolish. That was when a gentle voice reached him.
A young woman stood nearby, holding a small basket of food.
Her wrapper was simple, her headscarf neatly tied, her eyes kind and unafraid. She asked if he was well.
He hesitated, unused to being addressed without formality, and admitted that he was hungry.
Without asking his name or his story, she offered him what she had. He accepted, surprised not only by the food, but by the ease with which it was given. Her name was Zainab. She led him to her family's small home, a modest hut with woven mats and the soft glow of lantern light. Her widowed mother welcomed him without question. They shared a humble meal, speaking quietly as night settled around them. Edakuna ate slowly, not because the food was little, but because gratitude filled him more than hunger. In that small space, with no servants, no titles, no golden walls, he felt something he had never known in the palace: belonging. Days passed. He stayed in the village, working wherever hands were needed. He carried water, repaired fences, tilled soil under the open sky. His hands blistered, his muscles ached, and his body learned the language of labor. Yet each evening, as the sun dipped low and the village grew quiet, he felt a peace that palace's life had never given him. He sat with Zainab beneath the changing sky, speaking of simple dreams of honesty, of faith, of a life built on respect rather than riches. She spoke of wanting a man who feared God, who valued character above comfort, who would walk beside her rather than ahead of her. Edakuna listened, his heart tightening, because in her words he heard the answer to the question that had driven him from the palace.
Love grew quietly between them.
Not in grand gestures, but in shared meals, in gentle laughter, in moments of understanding. For the first time, Edakuna felt loved, not for what he owned, but for who he was becoming. Yet fear followed love like a shadow. Would she still choose him if she knew the truth? Was his silence a protection of his heart or a betrayal of hers? One afternoon, a wealthy trader arrived in the village. His clothes were fine, his jewelry bright, his voice confident. He noticed Zainab and asked for her hand. He spoke of comfort, of security, of a life far from struggle. Zainab's mother, worn by years of hardship, listened with visible hope. Such an offer could change their lives.
The trader turned to Zainab with expectation, certain that wealth would decide her answer.
But Zainab looked at Edekunal, dust on his clothes, honesty in his eyes, and then back at the trader. She shook her head. She spoke of dignity being richer than silver, of choosing with the heart rather than the purse.
The trader laughed.
Unable to understand how anyone could refuse comfort for a man who appeared to have nothing. Yet Zainab stood firm. In that moment, something broke open inside Adekunal, not pain, but gratitude so deep it nearly brought him to his knees. He had found what he had been searching for, a heart that chose the man, not the crown. Still, the truth pressed on him. One night, beneath a sky scattered with stars, he could no longer carry the secret. He told Zainab that he was not who he had claimed to be. He spoke his real name. He revealed that he was a prince. He showed her the small ring he had kept hidden, marked with the seal of his house. The words fell between them like thunder. Zainab stared, disbelief and hurt battling in her eyes. She asked if their days together had been a test, if her kindness had been examined like something to be proven. Adekunal knelt before her, his voice trembling, and told her that he had not come to judge her, only to protect his heart. He told her that though he had hidden his name, he had never hidden his love. Tears filled her eyes. She turned away, wounded by the truth she had not been allowed to choose. That night, she left him standing alone beneath the stars. For the first time since leaving the palace, the prince felt fear not of poverty, not of hardship, but of losing the one person who had seen him as a man. At dawn, the sound of hooves thundered into the village.
Royal guards dismounted, armor catching the morning lights.
The villagers froze in shock as the captain called for the missing prince. Eyes turned slowly to Adekunal. Zainab stepped forward instinctively, fear and loyalty in her posture.
The guards knelt before him, their heads bowed.
The truth spread through the village like wildfire. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. Adekunal was no traveler. He was the heir to a throne.
He walked to Zainab and placed the ring in her hand.
He told her that he could return to the palace, but without her, it would be empty. He did not ask for forgiveness that day, only for a choice. Zainab looked at him, at the man who had labored beside her, eaten the food of the poor, spoken without pride, loved without condition. She saw not a crown, but a heart she recognized. And in that moment, she chose love over fear. They returned together to the kingdom. Trumpets sounded as they entered the palace courtyard. But this time, the celebration was not of power, it was of truth. The king embraced his son and welcomed Zainab with respect, seeing in her not a village girl, but a woman of character. Their union was not a display of wealth, but a testament to humility.
The poor sat beside the rich.
Drums echoed not for royalty alone, but for love that had crossed every boundary. And as Adekunal held Zainab's hand
Beneath the open sky,
he understood what his journey had taught him. He had hidden his crown to find a heart, and in choosing to be seen as nothing, he had discovered everything. For in a world that bows to gold, true love kneels only before character.